Hey guys, so I originally uploaded this video almost 2 years ago, but YouTube ended up unfairly demonetizing it. So instead of just deleting it, I asked you guys in a poll whether I should re-upload it, and the overwhelming majority said yes. If you enjoy it, feel free to give it a like or comment to help it find its footing again in the algorithm. And get ready because next month I have a bunch of holiday videos and channel updates that I'm sure you're gonna love.
That was fighting for gay rights, and people were killed.
Nobody was killed at Stonewall.
Nobody was killed.
The winner of RuPaul's Drag Race All-Stars. The next queen to be inducted into the Drag Race Hall of Fame is... Miss Cracker. Okay, it's time for dinner! I can't breathe. I have a confession to make. I fear I've made a terrible mistake. Miss Cracker.
Sashay away.
Because, Angina, you didn't believe in yourself.
Jujubee. Congratulations, you are the top all-star.
I've been waiting a really long time to win something. Thank you.
All-Stars 5 is considered to be, by many fans, as one of the lower ranking seasons, where the scope of the competition felt almost too easy when it came to figuring out how it would all play out. It's sort of why I never really came around to making a video about it, since I didn't think that I'd have a lot to say. However, after rewatching the whole season for the first time since it originally aired, I decided to go over every single thought that I have when it came to my viewing experience. So enjoy what's going to be sort of a different pace than my normal content. We'll go through my general thoughts on the cast, notable moments in the season, my problems with the season, how it could have improved, and what we should feel looking back. But before we start, are you someone that has an online following or is trying to build one? Well, this video is brought to you by Squarespace, the super easy platform that helps you build a website without the stress. Whether you're a creator, a business owner, or just want to share your work online, Squarespace has everything you need to get your site up and running in no time. You might think that it's hard to make your own website from scratch, but with Squarespace, it doesn't have to be. Their drag and drop builder and sleek professional templates make it simple to create a site that fits your vision. No coding skills required. Pick a design, tweak it to match your style, and you're good to go. Although what really sets Squarespace apart, it's its integration system. Everything you need to run your site is in one place. If you're selling products or services, Squarespace Payments lets you quickly set up a store and offer payment options like Apple Pay, Klarna, and Afterpay. Want to grow your brand? Their SEO tools help your site show up in more searches, bringing in the right people. Ready to take your website to the next level? Click the link in the description, and once you're ready to go, click the link in the description, and once you're ready to go public, get 10% off your first website or domain. Now, let's begin. The first thing that's important to acknowledge before we talk about All-Stars 5 is that at the end of the day, even the most heavily critiqued seasons like All-Stars 1 or Season 7, at its core still possess a degree of entertainment value to them. Like sure, maybe sometimes we disagreed with how things played out, but we always had things to rely on for other enjoyment, such as the runways, lip syncs, or just general moments with the cast. What it really comes down to is just how memorable the season manages to be in the long term. For example, if there isn't a lot of peaks to the season with notable moments, it may cause some viewers to not want to return to rewatch the season. It's sort of why many consider All-Stars 2 to be one of the best of all time, because regardless of how many times you watch it, you can still put on a random episode and find yourself paying attention to it because it has that rewatch value. My perspective going into any Drag Race season is that I want to come out of it with a positive experience from watching it. Not just for me, but also for the queens themselves who spend so much time and effort getting ready for the show. Plus, having to deal with the pressure that comes with being in the spotlight of one of the most watched reality TV competitions in the world. That being said, it has now been almost 4 years since the airing of the 5th All-Star season from RuPaul's Drag Race, which filmed in the summer of 2019, but wouldn't air until deep into the lockdowns of the COVID-19 pandemic in the summer of 2020. While it's true that it wasn't the most entertaining season, it made me wonder why so many of us came to that conclusion. Maybe we as an audience had gotten spoiled from the iconic moments that we got from All-Stars 2, 3, and 4. At the same time, all of the All-Stars before the 5th season consisted of queens where the majority of them were bringing their A-level game. But there was also other factors. All of these seasons also had a certain degree of unpredictability. All-Stars 2, sure, we had Alaska as the frontrunner with the best track record, but the fan reception for her at the time that the season was airing was super negative, with Katya having like 80% of the fan vote for who should be crowned. Then in All Stars 3, while maybe in the preseason it might have felt like this was Trixie's season to win, she would go on to spend half the season sort of underperforming, as we saw actual frontrunners like Ben de la Creme or Shangela cement themselves as contenders. With All Stars 4, Manila Luzon became the frontrunner only to be eliminated a couple weeks right before the finale. But then we get to All Stars 5, where not only did a lot of these queens get in their head, but two of them felt so beat down by the competition that they would go on to choose their own lipstick so that they could go home. Yet how did it get to this point? On May 8th, 2020, the official cast of All Stars 5 was revealed to the world. While we didn't get an official promo, we did get all the entrance moments from each of the queens that were used as its own version of a trailer for the season. At the same time, I think this was the exact moment that a new trend started to happen, with Drag Race releasing footage of the entrances weeks before the actual first episode airs. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure All Stars 5 was the first season to do this. And it wasn't even on purpose, since had the pandemic not happened, they would have just given us an official promo and we probably wouldn't have seen the entrances until the actual episode aired. Which makes me happy that to this day they continue to use this process, because it gives more time to celebrate the queen's looks rather than being overshadowed by the challenge and elimination that occurs later on. But anyways, one of the first things that stuck out from this season was the cast itself. I forgot who it was that said it, but during the time period between the filming of All Stars 5 and the time that they officially announced the cast of the world, Shea was on tour with one of the haters roast, and one of the queens made a joke about how all it took for Shea to come back to compete was a cast filled with queens that had underperformed for most of their original seasons, which was kind of funny, but unfortunately I couldn't find a clip. Regardless, it made a lot of sense that Shea rejected her invitation to both return for All Stars 3 and All Stars 4. It provided her with a couple of years to just spend her time touring, allowing her to come back as a fully evolved version of herself. But at the same time, we can't disregard the fact that during the exact time period of All Stars 3 and All Stars 4, fans were also hyping up queens like Trixie Mattel or Valentina to make their returns. So in a sense, there was a lot of competition in terms of fan favorite queens with huge fan bases hyping up their returns. So in a way, you kind of wanted to be that queen going into the season, because there's a chance that production might be hoping for you to make it at least through the first couple episodes. Within the All Stars 5 cast, there was queens that people had been constantly wanting to see back, such as Shea Coulee, who people felt was robbed on season 9, Miss Cracker, who made it to the top 5 of season 10, garnering a pretty decent fan base for herself. Then we had Alexis Mateo and Jujubee, who were the two All Stars 1 queens who were giving a third opportunity at competing, something that many fans were excited about since all the All Stars 1 queens were done dirty, except for Chad Michaels. But then this is where the heavy hitter contenders sort of stopped. Half of the All Stars 5 contestants were considered by many as underdogs, the most prevalent one being India Farah, who was at the time the most out of left field casting decision from an All Stars. Yet for that very reason, it was exciting to see a queen that nobody would have ever expected to see back on the show, giving her an opportunity to be able to prove herself to the world. Then we had Angina, which was kind of like a wild card pick, because we didn't know what to expect from a queen who hadn't competed since season 1, although she was shortlisted for 2 of the previous All-Star seasons. Then we had Blair St. Clair, Derek Barry, and Mayhem Miller, who all had pretty decent showings on their original season, but didn't exactly come across as the biggest threat compared to the cast as a whole. The premiere episode for All Stars 5 was one of the best episodes of the whole season. It was a great way to start things off. I mean, after all, it's an All-Star season, so it's always a tad more exciting when you already know most of the queens. What also created a lot of suspense was the introduction of the brand new All-Stars format. The Lip Sync Assassins gimmick did live up to its hype. Clearly, production wasn't going to be taking any chances this episode, so they made sure that their first assassin was someone like Evie Oddly, who for sure would bring a show. Yet despite the good start, the Lip Sync Assassin format began to spark a lot of critiques from fans that felt it wasn't going to be a sustainable gimmick for the show to rely on. The first queen to walk into the workroom is Shea Coulee, since not only was she the most hyped queen of the season, but also one that was going to be a clear frontrunner. Miss Cracker's entrance is one of my favorite ones ever. Then we have Alexis Mateo, whose presence on the season brought back a lot of the classic feel of Drag Race. It's hard to really find anyone who significantly dislikes Alexis, because everything about what she delivered felt authentically her. While it's true that there may have been a lot of doubts on her since it had been over 7 years since she had last competed in 2012, you could tell that she was super comfortable to be in front of the cameras. Next to walk in is Blair St. Clair, who goes on to have a really weird run on the season. The first thing she does when she walks into the workroom is to sell this narrative that she's no longer the shy, introverted young drag queen from season 10, and was now this cutthroat fashion icon that was coming coming in guns a-blazing. Yet as we'd go on to learn, she sort of ends up reverting back to that very similar personality that we saw in season 10. But what was noticeable was the evolution of her drag. The next to walk in is Mariah Paris Balenciaga, who is a whole video topic in itself. In both her original season and her return, we never really get to know a lot about her at a personal level. I'm not sure who's at fault for that exactly. Like maybe the editors didn't want to focus on telling her story, or maybe she didn't give them enough material to work with. Now, despite me being a fan of Mariah, based on some of the hilarious moments that she delivered on season 3, along with what I learned from her after the show, her return to All Stars 5 still managed to feel premature. Then we have India Farah's entrance look, which was really beautiful, but did you know that it literally looks like the same dress Lady Gaga wore for her entrance on season 9? Just different colors, of course, but do you see it? Alright, so now we get to Derek Barry entering the workroom as Britney Spears. I'm not sure how much of the Derek versus India saga came from a real place versus how much of it was Derek just trying to capitalize off the beef to create some drama for the producers. If you're a fan of my channel, then you know that Derek holds a special place in my heart. After all, without her, my channel intro would never be what it is today, so it's really unfortunate that things wouldn't play out in her favor. That being said, her coming after India while they were all putting on their makeup before the talent show set up some good context for us as viewers to have two queens to look out for, because one of them was clearly going to do better than the other, but nobody would have guessed that was India. The All Stars 5 talent show was the fourth one to ever happen on Drag Race. It's one of those challenge formats where it's really just an all-around good choice, since it's mostly left up to each contestant to come up with the best performance that they can to be able to represent themselves to the viewers and the judges alike. Despite this, out of all the talent shows that we had seen up to that point, this one was probably overall the least entertaining. Many of the queens didn't fully impress, with most of them giving a polished showcase of their talents that overall had a very safe feel to them. It's sort of why India Farah goes on to come out of the shadows as a surprise frontrunner with a high energy dance number that was both catchy and gaggy with how precise she was with her choreography. Other than that, the only highlights I remember from this challenge show was Mariah's choice to go with a visual interpretation of a spoken word poem, since it would go on to air in the middle of the Black Lives Matter movement that was at its height in the summer of 2020. Yet her performance would go on to play safe. In fact, the only other queen that was in the top who could have gotten the win was Alexis Mateo, who was the only other queen that matched India in terms of energy for the night. On the other hand, Miss Cracker's talent show, while the judges loved it, always seemed to me to be so out of left field, because I never really understood what the message that she was trying to convey with her set. She walked in referencing her season 10 moment where she dressed as a pickle for one of the challenges, but like, I didn't even know that people considered that to be one of her highlights of season 10. Still, it was a well-produced performance, and the song had a good quality too, so I can see why it was placed in the top. So then the judges announced India Farah as the winner of the challenge, while Derek Barry and Mayhem Miller land in the bottom two. At this point, the writing was on the wall, but Derek takes a last-ditch effort to take advantage and sort of warm up to India a little bit. So while deliberating in her one-on-one, she tells India in simple terms that despite her not liking India, she can still acknowledge that she slayed the episode and is happy for her. Of course, India had no choice but to play along. However, if you freeze frame this moment and zoom into India's head, you can literally see her brain counting down the seconds to finally be able to choose Derek's lipstick. The Lip Sync Assassin format introduced the Ladies Room, which was the set where the rest of the queens would cast their votes for the season. The design of the Ladies Room is actually pretty cunty. I mean, come on, the texture of the walls is glittery, and just overall the idea that within the parameters of the Drag Race universe, an important decision like the fate of one of the queens in the cast is decided in a washroom. The way that the queens voted on episode 1 was kind of shocking to me. In a way, it was kind of sad to see how they all unanimously agreed to vote out Derek Barry. Aside of course from Jujubee, who did choose Mayhem's lipstick. I kind of expected this vote to be a little more split, especially when we consider that while both her talent shows were flops, at least Derek successfully showcased her full set, while Mayhem ended up forgetting the words to her own original song, so we never got to truly understand what it was that she was going for. Regardless, by the end of the episode, based on the general consensus, Derek Barry would be the first queen eliminated from the season.
Oh, yeah.
Episode 2 really sets a precedent for the trajectories that each of the queens would have as the competition played out. Ongina had a lot of eyes on her because she was the only queen whose original season was the first season of RuPaul's Drag Race. If you didn't know, Ongina had been a queen that fans wanted to see return for a while, but mostly because she did have a good showing on season 1. What's more is that All Stars 5 was the first season since All Stars 1 to have a queen from season 1 competing within the cast, with the exception of All Stars 3, but Bibi Zahara Benet won season 1. So it could be argued that it was more of a time for her to showcase her talents rather than actually trying to make it into the Hall of Fame. It was actually really odd the way Ongina's time on the show ended up going once she returned. The talent show she did for episode 1 was in fact one of the least impressive, yet I completely understand why the judges ended up saving her from being up for elimination in the bottom 2. Like, I know we shouldn't take into account a queen's original season and just judge them based entirely on what they bring to All Stars, but in Ongina's case, the fact that she was among the sort of forgotten queens of the franchise made you want to root for her to do better and get another chance to showcase herself to the new fan base of the show. The second episode is also what I consider to be the moment where Shea Coulee pretty much sealed the deal that yes, she is in fact the #1 frontrunner of the season for getting the crown. What's more is that episode 2 was the first big high point of the season. The main challenge consisting of the queens having to each write some verses around being obsessed with their celebrity crush was excellent for creating some really good wordplay for some other time in the song. This challenge is one of those where even queens that did the worst in the cast still weren't necessarily all that bad. I hope that in future seasons they bring back a challenge like this where verses aren't so much about queens trying to sell their personal brand, but rather rely on storytelling through a common theme in the song. Shea Coulee's verse really was the best one out of all 9 queens present. Her celebrity crush was Chadwick Boseman, who unfortunately would go on to pass away from cancer just a couple months after the episode aired. The runway theme was Love the Skin You're In, which was a pretty decent runway overall. However, when Shea Coulee walked out in this fully bedazzled nude bodysuit, I was gagged. The look as a whole just radiated so much confident energy, which sold it on the runway. Subsequently, by the time the judges announced her as the winner, it felt super deserved. Plus, she goes on to destroy Alyssa Edwards in the lip sync and reveals that she chose to eliminate Ongina, who had pretty much given up during Untucked and would become the first queen of the season to choose her own lipstick so that she could go home. Before we move on, I wanted to point out that probably the best thing to come out of All Stars 5 is that it was great to see Shea Coulee finally get her deserved crowning. And I think most of the audience would agree that she did showcase herself as being worthy of being a winner within the franchise. Where the issues lied for most viewers was that as you watched along, the season seemed to have one of the most obvious set of events that would go on to transpire, making it lose its rewatch value. Yet why do so many fans feel this way about it? Well, there's many different components that took away from the finished product. Part of it came from contestants not wanting to play a cutthroat game. I mean, you know how sometimes people will say things like, oh, production is pushing this queen to the finale, which granted can be true in some instances. But that being said, in regards to Shea Coulee, I really don't think production cared that much about making sure that she'd make it to the end of the season. I mean, hear me out. Yes, from a production point of view, it would be cool to crown Shea Coulee, but let's not forget that by episode 3, Shea ended up being placed in the bottom 3 after the judges weren't impressed with what she delivered in the challenge or with the revealed runway that they labeled cheap looking, even though it was the most expensive outfit that she had brought to All Stars 5. On the other hand, the winner of the episode went on to be Jujubee, making a historic moment with it being her very first challenge win after competing on 3 seasons. Yet after achieving this, she'd go on to lose her very first lip sync in Drag Race history against none other than Monet Exchange, leading to Monet revealing that the queen that got the majority of the votes is Mariah Paris Balenciaga, who is the 3rd queen eliminated from the show. In a way, episode 3's bottom 3 was the first big opportunity that the rest of the queens in the cast were given to kick Shea Coulee out of the game. I mean, think about it. What a gag would it have been that after all these years of waiting for Shea's big return to the competition, she ends up being outplayed by queens who decided to go in a cutthroat direction. Granted, we did have Mayhem Miller and Alexis Mateo who both picked Shea's lipstick, but it wasn't enough to gain the majority of the group's vote decision. The 4th episode is a hard watch because I heavily disagreed with the judging here. The SheMZ challenge that many people in the fanbase don't like actually didn't seem all that bad for me. I would have preferred that they had gotten rid of the segment where they all had to pretend to be straight macho guys, but if we focused on the actual sketches among the queens, there was some funny moments in there. India and Mayhem sketch being one of them, which let me know what you guys think, but I remember that upon my first watch, it did get me to giggle. So I was shocked by the looming decision that would be made by the judges, where they would end up putting both India Farah and Mayhem Miller in the bottom two. Once all the queens put in their votes, we find out that Mayhem Miller is the second queen of the season to choose her own name out of the emotional exhaustion that was her run within the first 4 episodes she competed in. As a viewer, you couldn't help but sympathize with Mayhem's situation. The competition had finally broken her, resulting in her Faith being the 4th eliminated queen of the season. So now we get to All Stars 5 episode 5, which is the moment where everything just began to go off the rails so much that it was hard to know what was going on half the time. This episode was the Snatch Game of Love, a slightly altered version of the Snatch Game format where the queens are supposed to connect their answers to a common theme, which is to try to win over the heart of the celebrity guest who's on the other side of the wall. This of course differs from the normal Snatch Game where they don't really have to connect their answer to anything aside from the question, yet I've seen a lot of fans complain about the Snatch Game of Love. But honestly, I don't really have a problem with it being a special thing for All Stars. It's given us some pretty good moments, so as long as it's doing that, I'm okay with it. For this Snatch Game, Shea Coulee would end up winning for her portrayal of Flavor Flav. Yet this was also a point of contention with the fanbase, because it's been argued that the win should have gone to Alexis Mateo, whose character was a lot more funny because of how witty the answers to the questions were, as opposed to Flavor Flav, which is a character that you can rely on the gimmick of just making big goofy sounds. What also gave Alexis an edge is that at both of her sides, there was a queen that was completely flopping. So Alexis managing to save her whole group's round was commendable. By the time we get to the main stage, Ru announces a new twist, which is that moving forward, there will no longer be any safe queens. You are either the winner of the challenge or you are up for elimination. This would cause a shift in the universe, because it's directly due to this new change of pace that India would see an opportunity to throw Alexis Mateo under the bus as a last-ditch effort to save her own life in the competition, which simultaneously made us all forget that alongside India, Miss Cracker had probably the worst showing of the entire episode. Like, it's kind of crazy to think about how despite Alexis being a close call to winning the whole challenge, she ended up almost going home. Yet there is an alternate universe where Alexis does in fact win the challenge and lip syncs against her drag daughter Miss Vanjie, climaxing in her sending Shea Coulee home and winning the whole season. Yet back to reality. By All Stars 5 episode 6, India's lie managed to benefit yet another queen, which was Blair St. Clair, who without India would have ended up getting eliminated a whole week prior to when she actually did, as it's made very clear by the end of the episode that the queens decide to eliminate Alexis Mateo simply because they weren't entirely sure whether or not India was in fact lying or not. As you can probably tell, this was sort of starting to become a pretty frustrating watch for viewers, especially to see a frontrunner like Alexis Mateo go home while wearing one of the most impressive constructed outfits of the night. It was a sign that this season wasn't going to be withstanding the test of times in terms of highly regarded seasons. A long time ago, I was listening to a podcast that had Willem as a guest, and she made a comment about how on All Stars 2, the episode right before the finale, Detox had the opportunity to eliminate Alaska, who was the clear frontrunner of the season, alongside being Ru's favorite. But Detox chose to eliminate Alyssa Edwards, while at the same time acknowledging in her speech that she couldn't bring herself to choose Alaska's lipstick because she had done so good throughout the competition. Yet Willem's perspective is that it was this exact moment where Detox had actually lost the season. It was then that she basically submitted herself to going into the finale with the odds stacked against her, instead of the push that it would have given her to get rid of Alaska. So knowing this, when we get to All Stars 5 episode 7, which is the week right before the finale, Ms. Cracker wins her 3rd challenge, getting the opportunity to literally choose whoever she wants to get the chop. But despite knowing that Shea was her biggest competition, she chose to respect track records and finally got rid of Blair St. Clair. So the finalist of All Stars 5 would end up being a top 3 consisting of Jujubee, Shea Coulee, and Miss Cracker. While watching the finale of All Stars 5, it felt in a sense like we were counting down the minutes for when we would see Shea Coulee get the crown that she was waiting for. On a side note, I do feel bad for Jujubee because as much as it turned into a meme, to go on RuPaul's Drag Race and end up as a finalist in all 4 seasons must get to a point where it feels like a joke when they present you with the opportunity to do it again. When it comes to Miss Cracker, as I said before, it felt like she gave up the crown when she didn't choose to eliminate Shea right before the finale. And also, maybe this reveal might have contributed too. Before we end, I think it's important to acknowledge that even though it's fun to analyze why All Stars 5 didn't have a lot of success with the fan base, that at the end of the day, it did its job. And honestly, after rewatching it for a second time, do I see myself watching it again in the future? Yeah, maybe in like 10 years or something. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. Make sure to click the link in the description to get 10% off your first website or domain. I want to take a moment to thank my patrons. In the Elite Pink Squad, we have Matthew Burns, Gay Uncle, Sari Tish, Las Potitas, Cool Gal Nan, Jet Sam Adams, and Natasha De Leon. And in the Gay Squad, we have Lone Resident, Christine Gregory. And in the Green Squad, we have Kamen Rider Furry, Edgar Allan Pup, The Only Sean, IJS, Not a Punch But a Keek, Jack Beck, Galeria Gomez, Sarah G, Scarlet Rose, Boiled Peanut, Not an Omelet But an Egg, Max Whale, Dea, Dea, and Niall O'Hearing. If you'd like to see your name on the screen, you can support me on Patreon. The link will be in the description.